For decades now, Wi-Fi has been restricted to two bands, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and getting more and more crowded all the time. In recent years, IoT has made that situation even worse. Now, finally, there is a new open highway that your wireless can cruise on. The 6 gigahertz band is now available to users, and Wi-Fi 6E solutions are your on-ramp to that new highway. I'm Kevin Tolly, founder of the Tolly Group. Welcome to another episode of Tolly on Technology. Today, I am joined by Bruce Miller, who is the VP of Enterprise Product Marketing for Cambium. Bruce, thanks for joining us today. I think it is safe to assume that just about everyone is interested in faster Wi-Fi, so let's jump right in. So first off, why do I care about 6E?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, pleasure to be here with you today. And 6E is very interesting. I think it's something that is important to understand a little bit of the background. In a nutshell, it adds a significant set of new spectrum to Wi-Fi, and this is really for the first time in 20 years that we see this happening. There's been incremental changes and additions over time, but 6E adds about 1,200 megahertz of total spectrum. That's 500 megahertz if you're in Europe. And that is 59 new channels. And if you look at wireless technology, telecommunications technology in general, bandwidth is a fundamental resource. It's very precious, right? And you can get congestion and challenges when you have lots of usage for that bandwidth. So with Wi-Fi 6E, we're adding a significant amount to what is available for communicating in Wi-Fi. And that opens up applications like, AR, VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, telemedicine, where you're doing remote, operations and you need very low latency and very high quality video. And some of these kinds of real-time instantaneous use cases that really weren't considered too much with Wi-Fi before because it was more for just internet connectivity. So Wi-Fi 6E really takes the standard, the technology to a whole nother level of performance and capabilities, and it's a very significant advancement for the technology in general. Like I said,
so to be clear, I mean the name is a little bit confusing. If I look at Wi-Fi 6 and then I say, oh, Wi-Fi 6E, I guess the E means extended or enhanced. It's probably some incremental benefit to Wi-Fi 6, but that's not the case at all. And I think, as you said, 20 years since there's been a new band available. I mean, this is major. I guess that band was being held up or for other use in cellular or whatever, and the government finally decided to just let Wi-Fi users or Wi-Fi vendors have it.
Right. Unlicensed spectrum, it got freed up from other use cases. And to your point, the naming sometimes is a challenge. I mean, it would be great if it would have been called Wi-Fi 6 and matched with the 6 gigahertz and the previous generation was left, before that. But, in the end, it kind of took Wi-Fi 6, extended it, and then now it's part of the standard moving forward. So Wi-Fi 7 will include it, et cetera, et cetera. So,
okay. All right. So, obviously there's certain applications that need to, say, catch up with the available bandwidth, but they don't exist yet, or not in heavy use yet because the bandwidth isn't there. So like the artificial reality. But what today, if I'm sitting here and I'm an existing customer using the common applications in an enterprise, what will I see, or what applications that I have today will benefit from 6E or could benefit from 6E?
Yeah, I think most everything. I mean, your network is almost it is limited to the lowest common denominator. So, is your Wi-Fi poor? Is your infrastructure, your switch network old and needs an update? Or what's your internet pipe look like? What's your connection to your ISP? So, you want to eliminate the log jams and the congestion points. Wi-Fi in general, if you're up to 6 or 6E or otherwise, kind of takes that off the table usually. But there could be some very very high-end requirements for immediate high bandwidth connections and low latency, like the AR VR situation I talked about. And we have some customers today that are working with our equipment, and they're putting like literally a maximum of 2 headsets per radio. So very high bandwidth. And looking at that at 6E as the way to do that, right? For the first time, it opens up those kind of applications. So for average daily usage, it may not make a big difference initially for some things. Anywhere where there's density, anywhere where there's heavy real-time usage is where you're really going to see that benefit. But the broader scope is that you now have this, greater chunk of spectrum for, for designing your networks moving forward, and you're not going to be restricted to the limitations that, you had previously when you can open that up.
Okay, so it's not an if, right? I mean, it's not like, do I really want it? I want it, right?
Yeah.
Every Wi-Fi user is going to say, yes, I need more bandwidth. So then the next question is, how do I get there, right? How do I manage the migration from wherever I am today to Wi-Fi 6E? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because a lot of people look at that and they say, well, I'm not ready yet, so I don't need to buy, those new access points, or I don't think about it until I have devices on my network. But the thing to understand about Wi-Fi, and it's always been this way, is it's backward compatible. So that in general helps you migrate and move your networks forward. Most of the products coming out today, the Wi-Fi 6E APs, are generally tri-band, so they have both the old and the new. And so you can just deploy that network and run it with your existing clients and be fine. Now, one thing that we do in addition to this from the Cambium side is we see software-defined radios as very important, where you support both the 5 gigahertz and the 6 gigahertz on the same radio, and you can select which one you're operating on. So
okay, let me ask you this. So just so when I hear radio, I'm thinking, well, radio is a piece of hardware. How do I have software-defined hardware? Is there a quick explanation that would make sense to those of us who might not really be familiar with that concept of software-defined radio?
Yeah, so the chip itself, the Wi-Fi chip that we buy from the merchant silicon vendors, they support both bands on that chip. And so you literally just, through programming that chip, select one or the other mode, and then you have all the supporting components to, antennas, et cetera, to run either in 6 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz. So that's a very powerful option. You can start off with 5 gigahertz, and then when you're ready, you move to 6 gigahertz. And that migration and that
it's already
decision
there.
is important.
It's already there. You just select it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And then so you can run these APs today as a standard access point, just like you would your existing equipment. And then when you're ready, you turn it on. So I think that's one way to think about it. These products are not restricted to 6 gigahertz only. They're general purpose access points, and they're actually probably going to run better than your existing ones. You just turn on the 6 gig when you're ready.
Okay. And now, so part of that migration, the infrastructure is part of it, but obviously I need to have clients that can take advantage of it. But I think you and I had a discussion previously that in some cases the clients are a little bit ahead of the curve in that some of the the current clients are already implementing some of the 6E chipset. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's probably more clients out there than what some people may realize that are operating on their own network. So early 2021, so you're talking over a year ago, some of the first phones started to come out, the CES show in early 2021, Samsung and a few others. And today, Google Pixel support it. iPhones will probably have Wi-Fi 6E by the end of the year. Most laptop vendors have products. If we look back at just kind of shipments, you're talking about several hundred million clients in 2021. 2022 is really kind of the year that 6E really comes of age. And then by the the end of next year is what, we're seeing about half of all smartphones would support it. So those clients are showing up on your network today. You probably don't even know about it because you don't have those radios turned on. But when they do, you want to be ready to support that. So looking ahead to where your network is going is kind of the point.
Okay, so it's if you build it, they will come type of thing, or maybe they're there already and you just
they're already. You just may not know about it, right? So
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so things are different, right? The power is different, the band is different. So the very next thing one has to think about is my Wi-Fi design, right? How is my Wi-Fi design impacted by the new 6 gigahertz band? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is an important one because the Wi-Fi 6E or 6 gigahertz power levels that were initially approved and certified, there's different types. So there's a low power and there's a standard power mode. There's even a very low power mode. But the main point here is that the levels for indoor usage are lower than what you have with Wi-Fi 6, up to 12 dB lower. And so if you take a Wi-Fi 6 EAP and you turn on that 6 gigahertz radio, you're not going to get the same coverage that you would from the 5 and the 2.4 gig radio.
So it's more bandwidth, but a more restricted geographical or footprint for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a whole discussion about automatic frequency control where you have to coordinate the use of the 6 gigahertz band, and that That still isn't in place yet, but that's going to be required for outdoor usage. But in the meantime, this low power mode is what we have for indoor usage today without licensing, and you can just use it straight up. But now you have to start to look at, well, it doesn't cover the same as the other APs. So what do I do? One of the things to keep in mind there is range is generally less important with Wi-Fi design today than it was in the past. It's more about capacity. And so when you're putting, an AP per office room or an AP per hotel room or per classroom, in general, you're probably going to get 6 gigahertz coverage.
Yeah, you're covering it all. Okay.
Yeah. So, but how important is it? Do you need that ubiquitous coverage? Is it important in the stairway and the elevator, and then in the hallways, right? Perhaps not. And maybe you don't worry about providing 6 gigahertz ubiquitous everywhere, but it is just something you need to keep in mind.
Right. But if I had a tri-band, as you're talking about, then I could have let's say, to use your example, my 6 gigahertz in the room or the classroom, but in the hallway, in the stairway, it's 5 gigahertz. And that's okay, because somebody's just transiting that. They're not losing coverage, but yeah, I just maybe don't want to pay to have the 6 gigahertz everywhere.
Perhaps not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is a tool that we have called Wi-Fi Designer that can help with that. So, as you see right here, this video shows how the access point can be changed in the radio settings for one or the other band, actually all 3 bands, and then you can get a view of that within the design. So you may, design for ubiquitous 6 coverage, you may not, depending on what your use case is.
Okay, but I mean, it seems that the message here is, even if, let's say, I don't have Wi-Fi 6E rather in next year's budget, if I'm deploying a greenfield site or upgrading a site, I better do my wireless planning to make sure that I get the 6E coverage where I want it when I do migrate to it. Is that safe?
Yeah, and you may, like most people, will probably just look at swapping the APs out one for one. So I take down the old one, put up the new one. What do I get for 6E coverage? Is that sufficient? If not, and I really do want to get ubiquitous coverage, I may need to add more APs. So there can be some considerations like that. But just, again, one per room, we even see that in hospital rooms. You're getting 10, 15 devices in a single hospital room. You end up with one access point in the design. And when you're in a one per room kind of scenario, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about it. But of course, your mileage may vary. So that's why we have the design tools to help you make those decisions. Okay.
Well, speaking of Cambium network, so throughout our conversation, you've been mentioning some little things. Can you pull it together and give us a little bit kind of the Cambium network's view on 6E and tie together some of the pieces that you've brought up in the past few minutes?
Yeah, sure. So I alluded to the software-defined radio component earlier, and that's a very important part of what we do. Again, backward compatible. Use the AP like you would a standard one today, and then you have that option of turning on the 6 gig. And in fact, we have a migration assistant in our management platform, and this video shows an example of that, where you can switch between 5 and 6 gigahertz on the fly, and you can run that in a template across all your APs. And the system will actually, suggest or recommend when it's time to migrate based on the number of based on the number of clients that are
number of clients
6 gigahertz capable. Yeah. Okay. So that's a really nice little tool, because it'll help you track that usage over time and then make the decision at the appropriate time. So those are a couple of things that we put into our solution, is that programmability, that ability to track it in the management tool, and then to scale that directly into your Wi-Fi network. So, like I said before, 3 radio APs are going to be the standard tri-band, and now we've added several options to the portfolio to support that at different levels of density. Okay.
So I take it then with clients, when they show up and find an AP, they try to connect at the fastest level they support first and then back off. That's how the tool would know that there are clients trying to get in at 6E.
Yeah. Well, that tool will help you recognize the presence of the clients, and then when they actually connect, then we have like a band steering capability that will direct them to the appropriate radio. So that's a very good point. You want your fast clients running on the fast radios. We always make the analogy to a freeway, right? You got the fast lane, that's where you're going to get your fast cars going, and the slow cars in the slow lane. And you really don't want to mix those up, because you're going to slow everything down if you have the I don't know, the horse and carriage and the
Yeah,
fast
yeah,
lane. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
not going to make
Okay,
any
so
sense.
that's the steering part of it. Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and now you have more lanes. The other kind of analogy there is now I have 59 lanes on the freeway, compared to 24 or 3 in the
Yeah, you
2-4.
have
So
a lot more. I mean, again,
a
it's not,
lot. Yeah.
you basically can't stress that enough. It's not just a trivial incremental improvement.
Right.
It's vast.
It's
Right.
vast.
We
Right.
can't even
Right.
use really the freeway analogy because you couldn't build a freeway wide
Yeah.
enough, right? To
Right. You can't
span
mentally
that.
picture a 59 lane freeway, but
Yeah.
it's tripling the spectrum. I think that's
Yeah.
perhaps the best way to do it. When you triple the amount of available bandwidth, that's a lot more,
Mhm.
bottom line.
Okay.
So.
And now there's, I mean, for US based customers, it's available. I guess, if you're watching this and you're in Europe or Asia, you need to check locally because each government has to go through and free up that spectrum, or how does that work?
Right, right. It is very dependent on the countries. Some have adopted it already, and for early adopters, some are still waiting to go through that process. The U.S. has opened up the entire 1200 megahertz of spectrum. If you're in most of Europe, it's 500 megahertz. Korea. There's other countries that have approved and are kind of on the first run through in terms of supporting it. And there's other countries that are still kind of in the works on approving usage of 6 gigs. So yeah.
I understand that Cambium Networks has some unique high density solutions. Could you give us a little insight into that, Bruce?
Right. So with this introduction of Wi-Fi 6E into the portfolio, we brought that together with our industry exclusive high density Wi-Fi design that really carries over from the Zurus technology, which was an acquisition about 3 years ago from Cambium. And we have a 5 radio access point that really is the most powerful in the industry, up to 15.6 gigabits of total bandwidth,
Wow.
2,500 maximum connections. And the idea here is when you have a high density solution, which I would define as 50 to 100 or more devices connecting in one place, you can put an access point like this, and it'll scale up to hundreds and hundreds of connections, and it will replace 2 or 3 or even 4 APs that you would do in a traditional design. When you do that, you're putting in a lot less equipment, and then that lowers the TCO. I don't need to obviously install that equipment. I don't need to run cables and switch ports and everything else. So it's really a significant cost saving measure when it comes to that. And this video here just shows a little bit about how that is set up in our management system, where you have 5 radios. 2 of them are Wi-Fi 6E or 6 gigahertz capable.
Mm-hmm.
And with the SDR, I can configure those to either 5 or 6. So I could have a configuration that has 4 5 gigahertz radios, or 2 plus 2, 6 gigahertz, et cetera. I have that flexibility, but I have that scale across 5 radios to configure high density and really address those kind of use cases, whether it's a lecture hall or a library,
from
or
a
whatever.
school or conference center, or wherever I have a lot of people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. So obviously Cambium Networks has quite a portfolio of wireless products. Where can people go if they want to get more information, on what you offer?
Yeah, so we'll put a few of the links here that you can see on our website or otherwise, and how to contact us. Some exciting new technology and solutions that are really unique in the industry, really industry exclusive as far as how we can scale on that density and the software defined parameters there. So click through here if you're interested in learning more. Good
stuff. Bruce, thanks for your insights today. Thanks everyone for joining us, and check back soon for another episode of Tolly on Technology.